The Jeep was the color of old moss and bad memories. Flat, chalky olive, sun-faded at the hood where a ghosted U.S. Army still bled through like a rumor. Ilara Duskin ran her thumb across the paint and felt it crumble under the pad of her finger, a dust that smelled like motor oil and rain that had not fallen yet. $900 for the whole stubborn thing, keyed into her budget with the precision of a woman who counted the cost of everything and still dared to want more. She listened for what the engine wasn't saying. That had been her trick since she was a kid crouched beside her father's tool chest, the listening. Plenty of people could fix, fewer could hear. The manifold studs were rust-welded, the fuel line had kissed more air than gas in a decade, and something in the timing chain spoke in a cautious whisper. It would run. Not yet, but it would. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The auctioneer's voice still rang in the corrugated tin of the county fairground like the rattle of bolts in a coffee can. Ilara had outlasted 3 men who wanted the Jeep for parts and 1 who wanted it for a yard ornament. She wanted it for neither. She wanted the way its angles were honest, the way the steering wheel sat like a promise, the way, when the breeze came through the open frame of the windshield, something in her chest loosened as if a hand had stopped squeezing. "Got yourself a relic," the clerk said, when she handed over the 9 faded hundreds she'd stored in an envelope taped under her sink. "Relics break hearts." "Relics don't make promises they can't keep," Ilara answered, tucking the bill of sale into her backpack. She climbed in. The seat was springy in the wrong places and stiff in the rest, the canvas torn and mended with dental floss and stubbornness. The ignition key was a stub of brass that turned like an apology. Nothing. She leaned forward, exhaled, and listened again. The Jeep had the quiet of things that needed to be asked politely. "Okay," she murmured to it. "You've been sleeping. I get it." She popped the hood and propped it with a broom handle someone had whittled down to fit a notch. Spiders ricocheted from the housing, birdseed husks, mouse droppings, brittle frays of electrical tape. She felt a familiar quickening in her hands, part fear, part hunger, at the list she began making in her head. New plugs, new wires, carb clean, fuel line flush, coil test, compression check if she could coax it to cough first. It wasn't just the mechanics. It was the ceremony of making something dead choose life again. The fairgrounds were sinking into evening. Floodlights hummed to life, throwing out halos that made the dust look like snow. A handful of men loaded scrap into flatbeds. Someone revved a dirt bike, sound like bees with bad intentions. Ilara wiped a streak of oil across her cheek the way she always did without noticing, and tugged at the battery cables with pliers until the bite of conductivity surged through the Jeep's tired bones. She tried the key again. This time, the solenoid clicked, sulked, and then, grudgingly, let the starter drag the engine through a single rotation. She could have cried from that single stubborn turn. "There you are," she said, half to the Jeep and half to herself. "There you are." The man was watching from beyond the chain-link fence, hands hooked into the diamonds like a schoolboy. She saw him as a reflection first, his shape in the Jeep's dull hood, then turned to meet the original. Tall, but not imposing, a face that had been handsome until stubbornness set up shop in the jaw. His left ear bore a crescent scar, the kind you get from hard plastic and adrenaline. "You bought it," he said, "not a question." "I did." She straightened. "You one of the men I outbid?" He shook his head. "I came to see who would take it." Ilara closed the hood carefully, as if not to wake something dangerous. "People usually come to auctions to buy." "Sometimes you come to see what leaves." He nodded towards the Jeep. "May I?" He didn't mean to drive. She could tell by the way he walked around at first, fingers held close to his sides like he was in church and the pews were memories. He stopped at the front bumper and touched the metal lightly, thumb brushing a dent that made his face change almost imperceptibly. "I'm Alara," she offered, because silence had begun to say too much. His eyes lifted to hers, gray, exhausted, clear. Micah Weller. The last name landed with a quiet weight, like a toolbox set down on a concrete floor. No bang, just gravity. My brother's Jeep. She didn't say the obvious things, that the bill of sale said otherwise, that Jeeps outlived the names we tried to nail to them, that everything in this world was borrowed. She looked back at the machine, at the stubborn angles, at the shallow pressed star beneath the peeling paint. "What was his name?" she asked. Micah's mouth made a move that wasn't a smile. "Jonah." He stepped to the driver's side, leaned in, and with a familiarity that startled her, pressed his palm against the dash where the metal bowed in a shallow curve. "Why do you know exactly where to touch?" she asked, softly. "Because we rebuilt this dash in our parents' driveway before the deployment," he said. "Because our mother made lemonade and our father pretended not to cry. Because he wanted to leave the dash as it was, but I said we should smooth it. He said, no, leave the dent. It's the way it remembers." Micah's fingertips flattened, covering the place the way you hide a scar in a photograph. And then he didn't come back. Alara felt the air thin. The auction lights made a high electric whine that came and went like a wave. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it with a force that embarrassed her. He nodded once, not as acceptance, but acknowledgement. It's not a fresh sorry. It's the kind that gets folded and unfolded until the creases tear. They stood together with the Jeep between them, like a stubborn relative. "I'm not here to take it," Micah said, reading the narrowing of her eyes. "And," he swallowed, "I don't think I could drive it." "What are you here for?" "To ask what you intend." She almost said the line she used when people questioned her choices. "I intend to fix what can be fixed and carry what can't." Instead, she let herself say more. "I intend to listen, and then I intend to drive." Micah's gaze studied her with the wariness of a man who was used to speaking in brave slogans that fell apart under weight. "Where?" "It doesn't matter," she said, then amended, "It matters, but not to other people." She looked back at the name on the dash she could only feel and not see. "Maybe where it remembers." Micah flinched. "It remembers plenty where it sat," he said, voice too calm. "But if you're aiming for the base, you can't go on. They won't let you through the gate with an old ghost like this." "I wasn't thinking of a base." Alara tucked a coil of hair behind her ear. "I was thinking of a river." The silence shifted. Micah's eyes brightened with dangerous hope. "Which river?" "I don't know yet," she confessed. The first time I touched the wheel, I smelled water. Not ocean, brown water that moves like it has somewhere to be, the kind with a bridge you only cross when you're sure." She hesitated. "Do you ever smell things that aren't there?" "Every day," Micah said, and his voice softened like cloth after too many washings. "Cordite, hot dust, orange peel from a care package, rain that never arrived." Alara slid into the driver's seat and patted the passenger side. After a long beat, Micah walked around and got in like a man entering a room he swore he'd never see again. "Help me listen," she said. They did. They sat with the hood open and the night leaning in, her hands steady on a test light, his memory steady on the parts. He knew the Jeep the way you know a sibling's laugh in a crowded room. She knew that kind of knowing. It made her careful. When the engine finally coughed, a single hard bark like a dog who hadn't forgotten how,
She laughed out loud. Micah didn't. He put his hand flat against the fender and closed his eyes, the way you steady yourself on a kitchen counter when the floor moves. "Tomorrow," she said, when the fairground guard swung a flashlight beam lazily in their direction, "I'll bring a new battery, fuel, coffee. I'll bring the thing I came to bring," Micah answered, already opening the door. "What's that?" "A story, but not the one you think." Alara's apartment was an upstairs rectangle over a laundromat that sang in quarters and lint. She slept with the window cracked and dreamed so hard that she woke with her fingers curled around air that wasn't a wrench. In the morning, she ate toast over the sink and made a list with a pencil she had chewed down to its stubborn ferrule. Battery, fuel hose, filter, carb cleaner, plugs, oil, donuts, because grief eats sugar. The parts store clerk knew her by the cadence of her steps. "Project?" he asked, already reaching for the good spark plugs. "Resurrection," she said. The day crisped as it climbed. Back at the fairgrounds, Micah was already there, sitting on the hood as if to keep the Jeep from floating away. He wore the same jacket, the same scar, the same careful posture, but his eyes were different, gathered in. "I brought what I promised." He held up a flat tin box, the kind that once kept cookies or nails. It was dented at the edge and banded shut with electrician's tape. "What is it?" "Proof, and a request." Alara set the battery on the gravel and dusted her hands. "We'll start with your proof." He peeled away the tape with the concentration of a bomb tech and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in an old t-shirt shaved to threadbare thinness, lay 2 dog tags that clinked like small coins, a Polaroid bleached to ghosts, and a folded page torn from a field notebook. He touched the tags, but didn't lift them. He said, "They're not Jonah's, at least not both. One's a friend. And the Polaroid it's where I need you to go if you're going to do what I'm about to ask." Alara looked at the photograph, 2 young men with the hard smiles of people who had practiced them. The Jeep was there in the background, unmistakable even in blur. Behind them, tilting into the frame like a choice, rose a bridge of rusted trusses over a brown ribbon of water. "The river," she whispered. Micah nodded. "The Rappahannock. There's a concrete boat ramp on the south side. Locals fish there. On the night before his last mission, Jonah drove the Jeep to that ramp and sat with his feet in the water. He called me from there, left a message when I didn't pick up. I saved it until my phone died, and even after, I could hear the shape of it." "What did he say?" Micah's throat worked. He needed to leave a thing where it could wait. That if he didn't come back, the thing would be safer with the river than with a person. He didn't say what the thing was. He said the Jeep would know. Alara looked from the photo to the Jeep and felt something shift, the axis of want from her to it. "And what do you want me to do?" Micah held her gaze. "Take the Jeep there. Listen. And if it gives it back, whatever it is, bring it to me or to the person it belongs to now. I don't know which until I know what we're holding. You could take it. You could drive." Micah smiled without his eyes. "You heard what it said last night, the engine. It didn't want me. It wanted you." "That's not how machines work," she said, and both of them knew she was lying. Alara fitted the battery with a tenderness that surprised her, like buttoning a shirt on someone recovering from a fever. She flushed the fuel line, unscrewed a filter that had fossilized into a stubborn law, replaced it. She let Micah hand her tools, and he did, quiet and exact, like someone who understood offerings. When she turned the key at noonday, the engine cleared its throat, reconsidered, and then found a rhythm, a rough three-legged canter that steadied as the new fuel pushed the ghosts out. The sound drew men from other stalls and sellers who pretended not to care. It drew the guard with his flashlight from last night, who now leaned on the fence with the posture of a man watching a birth he didn't want to admit was miraculous.
Alara didn't grin. The grin lived inside her, private as the first cup of coffee that makes a day possible. She felt the vibrations of the engine in the bones of her hands, in the teeth of the steering wheel, in the hollows behind her knees. "Seatbelts?" she asked. Micah laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. "Ask the Fordies about seatbelts." He braced his hand on the dash where the dent lived and nodded. "Go slow." She went. The Jeep crawled out of its long sleep like an animal testing the weight of its own legs. The gravel lock complained and then welcomed. She edged onto the county road, waved at suspicion, and gave the engine a little more future. Trees rushed up on both sides, branches arcing over as if to shelter a secret. The first miles were a catalog of sounds: tappet chatter, exhaust cough, a squeak in the clutch linkage that needed grease and patience. Alara named each sound and filed it. Micah named the curves. "He used to downshift here," he muttered, and then, surprised by the thing his mouth had done without permission, fell silent. They stopped for gas at a place that hadn't decided what century it belonged to. The owner came out wiping his hands on a rag that had begun life as a t-shirt from a long-defunct softball team. "He still breathes," he said, admiration the shape of his breath. "She's remembering," Alara answered. "How far are you going?" "Far enough," Micah said, and the man nodded like that answer in its vagueness meant he recognized the kind of road they were on. Back on the highway, the wind wrote a new alphabet on Alara's skin. The Jeep had no doors, no pretense. It offered the world unfiltered and asked you not to lie about what you felt. The river was still hours away, but the Jeep pulled like a horse that scents home. They crossed the state line on a wide bridge that made Micah look right and hold there, his jaw working. Not this one, but bridges don't care about your specifics. They just remind you, all of them. Alara reached across the gear stick and touched his wrist with her finger pads. Not a hold, just a note. He looked down at her hand, and then out at the water, and then forward again. "Thanks," he said, not for the touch, but for its gentleness. They ate French fries in a parking lot that smelled like hot asphalt and the sun off old cars. Micah didn't talk much. When he did, the sentences came out orderly, like he had lined them up beforehand and numbered them. Alara wanted to ask what number the crying was. Instead, she asked about the Polaroid. "Who took it?" "Jonah," Micah said. "He was always taking pictures of everything that looked like a thing that would be gone when you looked back." "Smart man," Alara said. "He was a mess," Micah countered, but there was no heat in it. But he knew what to save. Evening came on while there was still an hour out. The light turned amber and wide, the kind that makes even tire shops holy. The Jeep's headlamps breathed awake, a pair of surprised eyes. "We could stop," Alara offered. "A motel? Finish in the morning?" Micah shook his head. "He went at night," he said. "Sometimes you honor the route if you want the destination to recognize you." "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes you make your own road and ask forgiveness." He glanced at her, a quick silver look. "You speak like that a lot?" "Not out loud," she admitted. The last stretch grew narrow and wooded, a two-lane that unspooled past darkened farm stands and mailboxes that leaned as if they were tired of taking messages for people who didn't answer. The air cooled. Alara shifted by ear. The Jeep held steady, a living thing that had decided to cooperate because she had asked rather than demanded. Micah sat forward, alert in a way that wasn't panic, but kin to it. "There," he said. "Next right." They turned onto a road that was more rumor than asphalt. Trees shouldered in. The headlights found the sign by surprise. "Public boat ramp, use at your own risk." Alara smiled beside herself. "I like when people say the quiet parts on signs." The ramp appeared as a thinning of trees and then a clearing that looked like a field had decided to quit halfway through becoming a parking lot. Gravel surrendered into poured concrete that slid like a gray tongue into the brown mouth of the river. The truss bridge rose to their left, a black geometry against the unfinished sky. Alara parked at the top of the ramp and cut the engine. The sudden quiet felt like when the power goes out and your house becomes a stranger. Crickets auditioned for a choir they were already in. Somewhere a fish worked out an argument with its surface. Micah didn't talk. When he did, the sentences came out orderly, like he had lined them up beforehand and numbered them. Alara wanted to ask what number the crying was. Instead, she asked about the Polaroid. Who took it? Jonah, Micah said. He was always taking pictures of everything that looked like a thing that would be gone when you looked back. Smart man, Alara said. He was a mess, Micah counted, but there was no heat in it. But he knew what to save. Evening came on while they were still an hour out. The light turned amber and wide, the kind that makes even tire shops holy. The Jeep's headlamps breathed awake, a pair of surprised eyes. We could stop, Alara offered. A motel? Finish in the morning? Micah shook his head. He went at night, he said. Sometimes you honor the route if you want the destination to recognize you. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes you make your own road and ask forgiveness. He glanced at her, a quick silver look. You speak like that a lot? Not out loud, she admitted. The last stretch grew narrow and wooded, a two-lane that unspooled past darkened farm stands and mailboxes that leaned as if they were tired of taking messages for people who didn't answer. The air cooled. Alara shifted by ear. The Jeep held steady, a living thing that had decided to cooperate because she had asked rather than demanded. Micah sat forward, alert in a way that wasn't panic, but kin to it. There, he said. Next right. They turned onto a road that was more rumor than asphalt. Trees shouldered in. The headlights found the sign by surprise. Public boat ramp. Use at your own risk. Alara smiled beside herself. I like when people say the quiet parts on signs. The ramp appeared as a thinning of trees and then a clearing that looked like a field had decided to quit halfway through becoming a parking lot. Gravel surrendered into poured concrete that slid like a gray tongue into the brown mouth of the river. The truss bridge rose to their left, a black geometry against the unfinished sky. Alara parked at the top of the ramp and cut the engine. The sudden quiet felt like when the power goes out and your house becomes a stranger. Crickets auditioned for a choir they were already in. Somewhere a fish worked out an argument with its surface. Micah didn't talk. When he did, the sentences came out orderly, like he had lined them up beforehand and numbered them. Alara wanted to ask what number the crying was. Instead, she asked about the Polaroid. Who took it? Jonah, Micah said. He was always taking pictures of everything that looked like a thing that would be gone when you looked back. Smart man, Alara said. He was a mess, Micah counted, but there was no heat in it. But he knew what to save. Evening came on while they were still an hour out. The light turned amber and wide, the kind that makes even tire shops holy. The Jeep's headlamps breathed awake, a pair of surprised eyes. We could stop, Alara offered. A motel? Finish in the morning? Micah shook his head. He went at night, he said. Sometimes you honor the route if you want the destination to recognize you. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes you make your own road and ask forgiveness. He glanced at her, a quick silver look. You speak like that a lot? Not out loud, she admitted. The last stretch grew narrow and wooded, a two-lane that unspooled past darkened farm stands and mailboxes that leaned as if they were tired of taking messages for people who didn't answer. The air cooled. Alara shifted by ear. The Jeep held steady, a living thing that had decided to cooperate because she had asked rather than demanded. Micah sat forward, alert in a way that wasn't panic, but kin to it. There, he said. Next right. They turned onto a road that was more rumor than asphalt. Trees shouldered in. The headlights found the sign by surprise.
Public boat ramp. Use at your own risk. Alara smiled beside herself. I like when people say the quiet parts on signs. The ramp appeared as a thinning of trees, and then a clearing that looked like a field had decided to quit halfway through becoming a parking lot. Gravel surrendered into poured concrete that slid like a gray tongue into the brown mouth of the river. The truss bridge rose to their left, a black geometry against the unfinished sky. Alara parked at the top of the ramp and cut the engine. The sudden quiet felt like when the power goes out and your house becomes a stranger. Crickets auditioned for a choir they were already in. Somewhere a fish worked out an argument with its surface. Micah didn't talk. When he did, the sentences came out orderly, like he had lined them up beforehand and numbered them. Alara wanted to ask what number the crying was. Instead, she asked about the Polaroid. Who took it? Jonah, Micah said. He was always taking pictures of everything that looked like a thing that would be gone when you looked back. Smart man, Alara said. He was a mess, Micah countered, but there was no heat in it. But he knew what to save. Evening came on while they were still an hour out. The light turned amber and wide, the kind that makes even tire shops holy.
The photograph showed the Jeep at the same ramp, under the same truss bridge, but the composition had changed. Instead of two men, there was a woman on the bumper. Dark hair in a messy knot, laugh lines that had arrived ahead of schedule, eyes that looked straight into the lens like she had recognized the person holding it as if from a dream. She held a folded flag against her chest, not as an emblem, but as a promise under construction. Alara turned the small object into the flashlight circle. It was a ring, the kind you bargain with in a pawn shop only if you have already decided to hate yourself. Engraved on the inside with J+L and a date that made Micah flinch as if someone had thrown a stone at him from the dark. Their wedding day, he said hoarsely. He kept it instead of giving it to her. Why would he? He cut himself off, shook his head hard. What does the letter say? Alara unfolded the onion paper. The script inside was Jonah's, but messier, as if his hand had been in a hurry, or his heart had been. She read slowly, letting the words enter her the way a night river enters your ankles, cold, undeniable, changing everything above it as it climbs. L, it began, and then, I can't send this. If I send it, you will come to the ramp and wait. I have to hide it where only the Jeep can keep it safe, because the Jeep knows the difference between people who want to hold on and people who need to let go. If I come back, I will open this with you, and we will laugh at how dramatic I am. If I don't come back, ask Micah to find the woman who bought the Jeep. She'll know how to listen. Alara stopped and looked up, her throat tight. He wrote my role into your life before he knew me, she said. It wasn't a question. Micah's laugh was a single free-fall sound. He always did things like that, wrote strangers into other people's maps. Keep going. She did. If I didn't make it, it wasn't because I didn't try. It was because there is a difference between bravery and luck, and I was one coin short. The ring is yours if you want it, and mine if you don't. The key opens a locker in town. The number is the lanyard. In it is what we shouldn't have kept, and what I was too afraid to hand over because I thought keeping it would keep you. If I'm gone, I was wrong. Let it go. Make it right. Then go to the river for me, and put your feet in until they go numb, and tell it all the things you won't say out loud. It listens. Alara's hands had begun to tremble. Not the fear tremor, but the kind her body got when the story inside her chest grabbed the wheel. She looked at Micah. What's in the locker? She asked. He shook his head slowly. "I have a guess," he said, "but guesses are the kind of fuel that makes engines knock." He pointed at a line near the bottom. "Read the last part." She did. "If you can't carry it, ask Micah. If he can't carry it, give it to a stranger who can. If nobody can, run until you are too tired to keep secret what should never have been kept. I love you. I love you. I love you. Tell the Jeep thank you. It always knew when to stall and when to save us." The night held very still. The river made its small mouth noises. A frog said something rude and unrepeatable, and that apologized by being quiet. Ilara's hands had begun to tremble. Not the fear tremor, but the kind her body got when the story inside her chest grabbed the wheel. She looked at Micah. "What do we do now?" Micah asked, sounding younger and older at once. "We find the locker. We see what we shouldn't have, and then we make a choice that doesn't lie." "Tonight?" She nodded. "There are some roads you don't sleep on." Micah's mouth compressed and then released. "There's a 24-hour bus depot in town. Lockers there. He and I used to stash fishing gear in one to cheat at being prepared." He glanced at the key. "That number? Yeah." They left the river with the care of people backing out of a conversation that mattered. The Jeep started on the first crank, a surprise that wasn't. The truss bridge watched them go like a relative who pretended not to care because caring hurt. Town was 20 minutes of fields and streetlights. The bus depot was a rectangle of light and tired faces. A woman with a baby asleep on the idea of her shoulder. A man in a suit that was losing an argument with his life. A teenager whose hair was a scream. The lockers stood along the wall like gray ribs. Ilara found the number on the key and the number on the door and made them meet. Metal hinges never forget how to creak. The locker opened on air first, the smell of cleaning solution and travel, and then on a duffel bag that sagged like it wanted to confess. "Do you want?" she began. "No, you." She lifted the bag and set it on the bench. The zipper resisted for 2 seconds and then gave way with a sigh like a held breath released. Inside lay a black pelican case with foam guts, a roll of cash banded with blue, a bundle of letters tied with twine, and a hard plastic envelope of the kind that keeps rain off things the weather wants to ruin. She unlatched the pelican. The case held a compact external drive, the kind government contractors use when they believe sincerely in redundancy, a sheaf of Kremental badges that did not belong to Jonah Weller, and a small pistol wrapped in an oily rag. Ilara didn't touch the pistol. The drive she lifted with 2 fingers like a butterfly that had landed where you didn't expect butterflies to land. "Jonah," Micah whispered, as if the syllables could shatter the room if he dropped them. Ilara opened the plastic envelope. Inside were photographs, high contrast, grainy prints of coordinates overlaid on desert and antenna fields, and a building whose roof was littered with dishes, like a sky had been broken and left to dry. There was a memo on letterhead, with a signature blacked out so thoroughly the paper had thinned. "He kept what he shouldn't have kept, because he thought it would keep her," Micah said, voice flat. "Or because he thought it would keep the people who told him to forget." Ilara opened the letters in the twine. She didn't read them, she weighed them. Weight counts. She set them gently beside the drive. The air in the bus depot shifted. Not the HVAC, the kind of shift that happens when you are no longer alone in the plot you thought was yours. Ilara felt it first in the back of her neck, the prickle of being counted by eyes. She lifted her gaze and saw 2 men in the door glass,
reflections only at first, then the originals as they stepped inside. Their haircuts were intentional. Their clothing tried very hard not to be a uniform and failed at the corners. Micah saw them a half-second later. His jaw changed shape. "Ilara," he said quietly, as if speaking to a skittish horse. "Close the bag."
She did, not as panic, but as ceremony, each item laid back as gently as it had been lifted. The pelican case clicked. The letters settled like small sleeping animals. The cash made its soft breath noise. She zipped the duffel and stood with it in her hands like a child who had been told to stop moving and was deciding whether to obey. The men crossed the room with the calm of people who had never worried about being told no. One smiled the way you smile when you want to turn a wolf into a dog. "Evening," he said. "You folks look lost. Need directions?" Ilara felt Micah step half a pace in front of her without actually stepping in front of her, the way some brothers do, and some don't. "We're fine," he said. "Sure," the smiling man answered, eyes already on the duffel. "Mind if I help you carry that to your car? Lot's dark. Wouldn't want anything to happen." The other man wasn't smiling. His eyes were flat in the way of pond water before a storm. He glanced once at the key lanyard still looped around Ilara's fingers and then didn't glance again, which was the glancing version of a siren. "We've got it," Ilara said, because she had carried heavier things than this. Grief, engines, the version of herself from the years she thought she was a mistake. "Where'd you get the bag?" the smiling man asked, as if making conversation. "Looks like it's seen some miles." "Ilara," Micah said again, and this time her name was both a warning and a please. The smiling man's gaze slid to Micah's face, took the measure of his scar and the posture he wore from a life that marches you whether you sign up or not. "You Micah Weller?" he asked, pleasantly as curtains. Micah didn't blink. "No," he said. "Because if you were, we'd be real happy to see you," the man continued, which sounded like a threat if you could hear under things. "We've been looking to return something that got separated from a case file." He tapped the locker with a knuckle. "Be a shame if someone turned up with the wrong key." The air inside Ilara cooled. Not fear, calculation, the way a mechanic listens when an engine changes its mind halfway through a hill. She held the duffel by the handles and drew in a breath, like a driver about to downshift. The man who wasn't smiling lifted his hand in a gesture that was not quite official and not quite gentle. "We'll take that," he said. "Will you?" Ilara asked, and surprised herself with the steadiness of her own voice. "Because I was thinking we were about to take it to the police station, unless there's a law I don't know that says bus depots are where you chain of custody classified things." The smiling man's smile thinned. "How about we all avoid making this difficult? We passed difficult an hour ago. The choice now is honest or loud." Micah shifted his weight. The not-smiling man's hand drifted toward a jacket pocket that had never once held chapstick. Somewhere in the building, a loudspeaker crackled to life and announced a delayed bus to a town that sounded like a promise you make when you're tired. "Ilara," Micah said softly, "do not run, threaded with do not fight. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." She tasted metal at the back of her tongue. The Jeep's engine, the river's cold, Jonah's letter, Lara's not yet face, everything braided into a single bright line that ran straight through her sternum. She angled the duffel against her hip like a shield, lifted her chin, and said, "Then we'll do it loud." The not-smiling man's hand cleared his jacket, and the glass door behind them blew inward with a sound like the night exhaling, a third figure stepping through the shatter with a voice Ilara recognized from a voicemail she had not yet heard and a face that belonged to the photograph on the bumper, older now, more tired, more alive. "Step away from them," she said, raising a badge that was not a smile, not a threat, but something that could turn into either. The badge caught the fluorescent light. Micah breathed a single word as if it were both a prayer and a wound opening. "Lara!" Ilara did not move. The not-smiling man's hand reached further into his jacket. The smiling man's mouth reset into something that wasn't any kind of weather you could name. The woman's eyes found Ilara's eyes and held them like a hood latch that finally caught. And the duffel shifted in Ilara's hands as if something inside it just decided it was done being hidden. The duffel flexed in Ilara's hands like a live thing remembering its spine. The woman in the doorway, Laura, didn't flinch at the shattering glass or the two men who rotated toward her with movements so practiced they had forgotten there were other ways to move. She stepped forward into the field of fluorescent light that made everyone look more tired and more true. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Federal Protective Service, Laura said, badge steady in one hand, the other palm out. Calm. Directive, not pleading. Hands where I can see them. You two, pockets empty. Slowly. The smiling man smiled less. The not smiling man's fingers paused at the edge of his jacket, then reappeared empty. Laura never took her eyes off their hands. You walk out, she told them, or you sit down and wait for the uniforms I just called. Your choice spends difference. Micah stood beside Ilara like a door that had decided what it would admit. Ilara felt the weight of the bag, the quiet thrum of the external drive inside, the letters still warm from her hands. She did a fast accounting of exits and distances and witnesses. The sleeping baby, the man in the suit, the teenager with hair like a flare, the clerk behind thick glass, the metal detector with a cardboard sign that said out of order in a pen that had run out halfway through order. "Ma'am," the smiling man said, his tone gone soothing, "we're on the same team. Teams write their names down. Bad actors say ma'am." He chuckled as if surprised he was impressed. "We'll wait for your uniforms." He nodded to his partner, palms raised, stepping back until their shoulders met the plastic chairs along the wall. They sat. Only then did Laura let her gaze touch Micah, skimming his face like a hand finding a familiar scar. "You look like him," she said, the words unsteady only to someone who knew what steadiness had cost. "And nothing like him." Micah's mouth opened and closed, the mechanics of speech jamming on a word that meant too much. "Laura?" He managed. "We found—" "The letter," she said, voice low, eyes bright. "I wrote all the other ones. He wrote that one." She nodded toward the duffel. "May I?" Ilara moved on instinct that felt like trust. She set the bag on the bench and unzipped it so Laura could see the contents without reaching in. Something about the way Laura held herself told Ilara this woman was practiced at not leaving fingerprints on things she wished she could claim. The drive, the cash, the fake badges. God, Jonah. The name wasn't a curse. It was a prayer that had learned to breathe through grief. She glanced at the two men against the wall. They weren't wrong to follow the key. They were wrong to think they knew what it opened. "Who are they?" Ilara asked. "Contractors, or the kind of wolves contractors hire when they don't want to be seen hunting. Someone with clearance realized this locker might breathe and sent them to make sure it didn't." She exhaled, and then, as if remembering how to be human in the presence of people who were not a file, offered her hand to Ilara. "We skipped your hello. I'm sorry. I'm Laura." "Ilara." She took the hand. It was colder than it wanted to be. "He wrote your letter to both of us." Laura's mouth trembled like something made of glass deciding it would not break. "That sounds like him." Her gaze returned to the duffel. "What we do next matters more than what's in there." "I was going to the police, and if that didn't feel like enough, the press, or a lawyer who knows where to point a flashlight." Laura nodded. "All good instincts, but I work with a field office that still remembers the difference between protecting secrets and protecting people." She hesitated and did not reach for the drive. "Micah, Jonah called me the night before he left. From the river." Micah's eyes closed once slowly. "We stood where he stood. He left this for you or for me, whichever could carry it farther." Laura swallowed and squared herself. "Then let's carry it together." Sirens sang near, their approach rinsing the room of pretense. The two men against the wall smoothed their faces into cooperative neutrality. Laura turned to the clerk, lifted her badge again, and said, "You saw them try to take the bag." The clerk nodded with the careful solemnity of a man who had always wanted a simple day and never got one.
Uniforms entered, 2, then 3. Hands were guided to the small of backs. Words were exchanged that did not belong to story, but to process. Names were taken, and would later prove not to be names. The men were walked outside, their smiles returned to the places they came from. "Let me drive," Laura said when the room exhaled. "We go to my office, we log the contents, and we make choices that can stand up in daylight." Elara braced herself to argue. Independence had been her survival, but there was something in Laura's voice that sounded like steel under velvet, and something in Micah's posture that said he knew what leaning looked like when it wasn't collapse. She nodded. "The Jeep or your car?" Laura looked at the duffel, then at the Jeep through the glass, its silhouette cut from night and memory. "The Jeep," she said. "If Jonah rode it into the route, we obey." The roads between Bus Depot and Federal Building were the kind that thought they could hide you. The Jeep thought otherwise. It held them in open hands. Wind collapsed and rebuilt Elara's hair. Laura sat in the back, one hand on the duffel as if to remind it that it would not be asked again to do what it had already done. Her eyes moving constantly. Mirrors, shoulders, rooftops, each checked, not paranoia, but a map you keep updating because it saves lives.
Micah rode shotgun, the word suddenly too literal. He kept a palm on the dash, over the dent, part warding, part thanks. The conversation braided around the noise. "What's on the drive?" Elara asked, and Laura's answer came after a beat that felt like her taking inventory of what she was allowed to say. "Proof," she said simply. "Of a task force that overstepped, then lied about the step. Of a contractor persuading a soldier that storing certain files off-network made everyone safer. Proof that the soldier, when he realized he had been used, tried to put the thing back in order and got himself killed doing it." Elara's hands tightened on the wheel. "He didn't die because he kept it. He died because he tried to return it." Laura's reflection in the windshield smiled in a way that could cut. "Yes." "And the ring?" Micah asked, his voice carefully not breaking on the word. Laura stroked the canvas of the bag with her thumb. "He didn't give it to me before he left because he said he wanted to put it on my finger twice, once forever, once for the choice we'd make after. It's a crazy person's logic until you've been in love with someone who is shipping out. Then it's Tuesday." Elara glanced at Micah, at the way he looked ahead and kept his breath steady, at the way grief had made him lean into duty instead of away from it. She thought of the river, of the words that had passed between night and metal, of the Jeep's hum in her cheekbone. "You drive what you can carry, and carry what you can't until someone offers to take a handle." At the field office, Laura's badge made doors do what they were told. She guided them into a conference room that smelled like carpet and coffee and long decisions. Fluorescent light hummed its disapproval of all things alive. Laura shut the blinds, even though it was past midnight, a habit that did not believe in clocks, and powered up a terminal that required more passwords than God. "We'll image the drive without touching a single original byte. Chain of custody, start to finish, no winks." She glanced at Elara. "You staying for that?" "I started this," Elara said. "I'll see it until we make a thing right." Michael remained standing. He couldn't be in a room and sit at the same time. Soldiers and mourners learned to conserve one motion for the other. He watched the hallway through glass that reflected him back at himself and did not flinch. Two agents Laura trusted appeared as if they had been living in the walls. She spoke to them in the language of procedures that had not forgotten why they existed. The drive was placed in a Faraday bag, then released into a lab that remembered what science was for. While they waited, Laura untied the twine from around Laura's letters, but did not unfold a single sheet. "He wrote to you every day," Elara said softly. Laura nodded. "And when he couldn't, he wrote 3 and mailed them when he could. Grief is arithmetic. Love is grammar." She exhaled. "Micah, I owe you. He told me not to tell you. I obeyed, and when the silence made us both drown, I kept obeying. I'm sorry." Micah's jaw worked. He took that apology, turned it over, recognized its weight, and chose to carry it. He gave us both the same impossible favor, to hold what he couldn't until it grew lighter. It didn't grow lighter. "No," Laura agreed. "We're the ones who did." The lab tech returned with a printout and eyes that looked both frightened and relieved. "You should see this," she told Laura, and Laura waved Micah and Alara along. On the monitor, file trees bloomed like winter branches. Video stills crashed onto the screen in a waterfall of frozen motion. Then documents, memos, directives, contracts, signatures that had fallen in love with the idea of their own importance. And audio, voices that could not have known they would be swallowed and then returned. They listened. Alara felt the hair rise at the back of her neck. Jonah's voice threaded in and out of the recordings, calm, respectful, carrying questions like a pack that didn't look heavy until you tried to lift it. He wasn't whistleblowing for glory. He was trying to stop a bad habit from becoming policy. Alara saw all the ways a good man can be used by people who are afraid of the light. "Enough," Laura said at last. Her voice steady, but thinner than when they had begun. She looked at the lab tech. "You and I are the only two who have seen the contents, and the three in the other room who handled the image without looking. You'll write that down." The tech nodded, grateful for the spine in Laura's words to hang her own on. "What now?" Alara asked, hearing how much the question contained. Law, consequence, relief, danger. "Now," Laura said, "I call a U.S. attorney I trust and a colonel who owes me a favor. We give them exactly what this is and no more. Not a weapon, not a secret, but a record. We will not let it be buried in a cross-reference graveyard or dragged across cable television until only the loudest parts survive." She turned to Micah. "And after that, we take the ring to the river." Micah closed his eyes. "And the letters?" "They're yours," Laura said. "Yours to carry, yours to burn, yours to read aloud until his voice sits down next to us and says it himself." They watched dawn find the slats of the blinds like a pianist rediscovering a forgotten key. Laura's calls went out into that liminal hour when men who had played at power all their lives were at their softest. She said things into telephones that made people wake up in more ways than one. The Jeep sat in the lot below, its olive back catching the weak sun, a patient animal who had decided to stay.
By mid-morning, the conference room held 4 kinds of truth. The recorded kind, the sworn kind, the kind you carry alone, and the kind that only lives when people gather and agree it should. A colonel arrived with a mouth like an apology. A U.S. attorney with the practical shoes of someone who runs toward things on purpose. They signed things Alara would never read and thanked her for her conscience with words that tried not to sound like absolution they did not have the right to give. "What happens to the contractors?" Micah asked, his voice cut to the bone. "They'll be charged with theft and interference," the U.S. attorney said. "What happens to whoever gave them reason to be here is the part that takes time and paper and 1,000 small pushes. It is not exciting. It is necessary." Alara listened for the click of a real gear and heard it when Laura added, "And I will keep my foot on the pedal." They left the building lighter and more exhausted than anyone wanted to be. Laura carried the ring in her pocket the way you carry a heat source that will not burn you, but will not let you forget it could. Micah carried the letters in a gray archival box the clerk had given him, the incongruity almost comic. Alara carried the keys. "Back to the river?" she asked. "Back to the river," Laura said. The Jeep rode softer now, as if the drive had noticed something about what carried what. The sun pressed their shoulders. The world on the road looked briefly like a world that knew how to fix itself. Micah rolled the window opening lower and let his hand find the outside air, a boyhood habit resurrected without permission. At the boat ramp, the same sign still told the truth about risk. The same river breathed like something old, that knew it was old, and had made peace with the ways people used its edge to negotiate with themselves. The truss bridge kept its geometry and its secrets. Alara stood at the water like it was an altar and a courtroom both. He asked me to put my feet in until they went numb, she said, half laughing at the audacity of being given instructions by a dead man and obeying them anyway. She unlaced her shoes and stepped down the concrete tongue, the water taking her ankles and then her calves. She hissed and smiled at the same time. "It listens," she said over her shoulder, and Alara knew she was talking to both of them and to someone else. Micah set the archival box on the hood and opened it. He took out a letter at random and did not open it. He held it to his chest and looked at the line where the river and the sky pretended to end. He was 26. I'm 31. I've learned 5 years of things I cannot tell him. Tell them anyway. The river has good ears. He did. He told the water about the day he stopped sleeping, about the morning he started again, about the scar in his ear and the friend who gave him the bottle that caused it and then apologized until apologies were a wall you could lean against. He told it about their parents, about lemonade that never ran out and a driveway that always had a project, about the way the dent in the dashboard was more than a dent. It was time, preserved. Lara waited to mid-shin and took the ring from her pocket. Sun made the metal start a small fire. He asked me to choose, she said. So I choose. She slid the ring onto her finger, left hand, the old road, and held it there a long breath. Then she slid it off and tucked it into her bra like the women in her family had always done with the things that mattered. He doesn't get to tell me twice, she said, not angry and not kind, just exact. Alara walked down to the water and let it touch her shoe, then her sock, then the skin under both. It was colder than sound. She thought of engines and the first stubborn cough that says a thing is not dead, only deciding. She thought of a letter written for 2 people, delivered by a third, and a 4th person, the Jeep, who had held the secret without complaint. Thank you, she whispered to the machine sitting warm behind her and felt ridiculous until the wind came across her face in a way she recognized from the fairgrounds on the first night, the way of something answering without words. You gonna keep it? Micah asked, when they had all come back up the ramp and sat on the bumper like a family that did not yet know if it could call itself that. Alara brushed her fingers along the hood's tired paint. Yes, she said, unless it tells me to let it go. Lara smiled. He would like you. He loves you, Alara said, simple as a wrench that fits, present tense. Some verbs don't conjugate to past. Alara's eyes filled, then cleared. What will you do now? She asked Alara. Alara thought of the laundry sung apartment, the parts store, the man who wanted to sell her a new life for 10% off and store credit. She thought of the way the Jeep had felt when she first put her hands on the wheel. Drive. Fix things that say yes when I ask, and carry what says no until it changes its mind. Micah grinned, the expression new and a little out of practice, like a song you'd forgotten you'd written. There's a diner up the road. He and I ate there once and pretended the eggs were good. Let's go pretend, Laura said. The diner had a waitress who could write orders on 3 tickets at once without looking. The coffee tasted like someone loved it anyway. They sat in a corner where Alara could see the Jeep, where Micah could see the door, where Lara could see both of them breathing. The world came by in pickup trucks and minivans, and one old man on a bicycle with a flag trailing in a way that would get you pulled over in a stricter county.
You could tell the story, Micah said to Laura around his eggs, that were better than the ones he remembered. Not the classified part, the human part. I will, Laura said, when it's time. And I'll say his name like a bell instead of a stone. She looked at Alara. He wrote you into it without asking you if you wanted to be written. I'm sorry for that too. Alara took a bite of toast that wanted more butter than it had been given. I've been written into worse, she said, and I've written my way out. She set down her fork. Sometimes people don't ask because they're hoping the person who arrives will choose it anyway. Laura stared at her for a long second and then laughed, a sound that startled the waitress into smiling without knowing why. Yes, she said, he would have liked you very much. They paid and left a tip like people who believe in gravity. The sky had chosen blue without caveat. The Jeep started to the quay like it was glad to go somewhere ordinary. Halfway back to town, the world introduced complication again. A black SUV took the turn behind them and held too close, then dropped back, then came up again. Laura saw it first in the mirror timeline she could not turn off. Friend? Alara asked. More wolves, but these ones read from different scripts. Hang a left up here. Alara did and found herself on a road that narrowed into absence. Trees closed ranks. The SUV followed, cautious now. What's the plan? Micah asked. Let them see us see them, Laura said. Then let the Jeep do what it was born to do. Alara smiled and shifted into second. The road turned to ruts, and then to a ribbon of dirt that had never believed in cars with low opinions of themselves. The Jeep climbed a small hill that felt bigger in the bones and dropped into a sand-bottomed wash where the geometry of SUVs goes to beg philosophy for forgiveness. The black truck stopped at the lip and reconsidered its life choices. Alara let the Jeep idle at the top of the next rise and looked back. The men got out. They didn't shout, they didn't wave. They stood in their shade and understood that sometimes doors close without anyone slamming them. Laura lifted her phone and took a picture, not to post, but to remember. Who were they? Micah asked when the trees opened and the road returned to its idea of being paved. People who don't like losing. They just learned that there's more than one way to win. She tucked her phone away and looked at Alara. You were right. The choice after difficult is honest or loud. We went honest, so they tried to make it loud anyway. Will they stop? They'll stop meeting to look at us, because we gave the story to a place that can keep it. Not a vault, a ledger. Evening gathered like a blanket that someone had washed and laid over the air to dry. They parked the Jeep in front of Alara's building. The laundromat hummed like a heart with coins in it. Laura stood on the sidewalk and looked at the Jeep the way people look at the house they grew up in when the siding has been painted a different color. You're keeping it, she said, more affirmation than query. I am, answered Alara. But if it ever asks me to take it back to the river and leave it there, I will. It won't, Laura said, with the confidence of a woman who had learned to listen to things beyond her pay grade. It's a creature of returning. It brings people to places and places to people. Michael leaned on the hood, arms crossed, the posture of someone who had earned the right to rest and was deciding if he would. I have a garage, west side of town, 2 bays and a roof that pretends to be a roof. You want to borrow one of the bays until you decide where the Jeep lives? Alara blinked. She wasn't used to being offered square footage. Yes, she said, the word bright and full. Yes, I do. They drove in slow procession, Alara in the Jeep, Micah ahead to open the door that rolled like thunder, Laura behind in a borrowed sedan that suddenly looked like what it was, a thing that carried people for a living. The garage smelled like oil and pine cleaner, and radios playing low in a back room where no one sat. Micah clicked on a row of lights that flickered into life like moths deciding. Alara eased the Jeep onto the lift, which was older than her and twice as honest. She killed the engine and sat with her hands on the wheel a moment longer than necessary.
"Thank you," she said. And Micah and Laura both said, "For what?" "For bringing me into a story I didn't know I needed to help end. You two okay?" Laura sighed in a way that made it clear sighing had for years been a luxury. "I'm going to go home and sleep on my left side because I can, and wake up to a coffee that returns my calls, and then call the U.S. attorney again to make sure paper is still paper, and then I'm going to take this ring to my mother and let her tell me all the things she didn't say when I married a man with a deployment date." Micah smiled. "And I'm going to read a letter every Friday until I run out, and then I'm going to start over. And I'm going to fix a carburetor that isn't worth fixing because somebody keeps asking me to scrap their truck, and I want to say yes and practice saying no." He looked at Alara. "And I'm going to teach you the trick with these brake lines, if you want to learn." "I do," Alara said, fierce as a vow. "Teach me all the tricks. I'll trade you one for listening." He nodded. "Deal." Laura stepped close and held out her hand. Alara took it. The shake was brief and exactly as firm as both of them needed. "If anyone asks for the Jeep, you tell them she's retired on active duty." Alara laughed. "Perfect." They stood together in the bright hum of the garage as if they had always been standing together, and the past 3 days were just how memory chose to explain it. Outside, somewhere, a siren practiced, but far away. Closer, the squawk of a grackle practicing being a crow. Closer still, the tick of a cooling engine that was older than any of them and had decided it would cooperate again tomorrow. "Come by the river on Sundays," Laura said when she turned to go. "I sit on the bumper and make fun of the teenagers who fish wrong. We'll bring coffee and correct their forms," Micah promised. Alara watched Laura go. She felt the tilt in the room as one gravity left and another settled. Micah leaned beside her, both of them looking up at the Jeep.
"You ever think machines carry prayers?" he asked. "Yes," Alara said. "I also think they carry choices. That's heavier." "Want to make one now?" he asked. And when she looked at him, he nodded at the Jeep's sagging canvas. "Top or no top? Storm season's coming." Alara smiled, a small, private thing. "No top," she said. "Let the rain talk to us. We'll learn the words." Storm season did come. The first rain rolled over town like a rumor that turned out to be true, hammering the roof of the garage until their conversation became pantomime and laughter. They spent the afternoon swearing at stubborn bolts and apologizing to Knuckles. Micah showed Alara the brake line trick. She showed him how to listen for a bearing going soft 3 days before it admits it. They built a lexicon out of grease and patience. Word spread that the Jeep was alive. Old men stopped by to tell lies about wars they hadn't seen and truths about ones they had. Teenagers asked if it was electric and then marveled as if gasoline had just been invented. A woman with a scar like a comma across her cheek asked to sit in the passenger seat for exactly 11 seconds and then got out and said, "Thank you," and left before Alara could ask for a story. Laura texted pictures of the ring on windowsills and courthouse steps and the palm of her hand against a map. She sent one of the river with her feet in to the ankles and the caption the way of someone learning to talk to the living again. "It still listens." At night, alone in her apartment over the laundromat, Ilana dreamed of bridges that chose her and of letters that unfolded into roads. She woke with her hands already clean, because she had washed them before sleep and let them stay that way. Some days she drove the Jeep out on county roads and let the wind edit her thoughts. Some days she left it on the lift and worked under it until the afternoon became evening without her permission. One morning, a package arrived, with no return address and a handwriting she didn't know, but trusted anyway. Inside was a photograph, printed on heavy matte paper. The Jeep on the ramp under the truss bridge. The river a ribbon of brown honesty. A woman on the bumper, Laura, now older, eyes that had learned that love is not a finite fuel,
holding a flag folded and unfolded and folded again, the crease line perfect. On the back, "Thank you for listening. I will too." Alara pinned it to the corkboard above the workbench, where other pictures had begun to gather. The old man on the bicycle with his flag, the teenager correctly holding a fish the size of his hope, a close-up of the dent in the dash, because you record the places that teach you to leave some dents alone. The contractors went to court and then to a place with locks. The colonel retired and moved to a town near a lake where he walked very early and thought about signatures. The U.S. attorney got promoted in a way that did not make her forget. That's rare and should be applauded with quiet clapping. The task force got renamed, then audited, then restructured into something that believed its job was not to hide mistakes, but to become shorter each year until it no longer needed to exist. These things did not make the news because they were the kind of victories that look like paperwork. Sometimes paperwork is grace. Jonah's name traveled back through the halls where it had been spoken too softly and began to be said at volume you could build things on. A scholarship appeared at a community college with a welding program. A plaque at the boat ramp that didn't say hero, but said his whole name and the dates and the word listen. On the anniversary, Micah and Lara and Alara met at the river, without texting, because some calendars live in the body. They sat on the bumper, and Lara read one of the letters aloud. It was about a day with rain that smelled like pennies, and a joke about coffee that had aged badly, and a sentence that said, "I don't know where I'll be when you open this, and it won't matter, because I'm in the part of your life that keeps breathing when you think you can't." The river lifted and set down a leaf with the precision of a surgeon. A boy on the far bank shouted in victory and held up a fish. No one told him to be quiet. Later, Alara drove home alone with the ring in her pocket, because Lara had pressed it into her hand for safekeeping while she went to talk to a mother who suddenly wanted to talk and might not if the ring stayed. She held it in her palm at red lights, the weight small and entire. As she turned onto her street, the Jeep made a sound she had not heard before, a soft, multiple click, like the noise a button makes when it is about to be pressed by a finger in a different room. She eased it to the curb and listened, and heard it again. "What are you trying to tell me?" she asked the dashboard. And then she found it. Under the lip of metal, where the panel had given up the envelope, a second cavity, smaller, sealed not with wax, but with stubbornness. She felt her breath skitter. "You old magician," she whispered. "You were not done." The screwdriver lived where it always did, in the jacket she had hung on the peg by the door, and then grabbed, and then forgotten to put on. She popped the panel gently, and a tiny roll fell into her hand, tape around paper. She unrolled it and found a strip of photo booth pictures of Jonah and Lara, tongues out, faces serious, faces less serious, eyes always on each other. And between the pictures, a strip of typed tape, like the kind label makers make when they are the happiest kind. If you found this, it means you listened twice. Good. Keep going. Alara laughed right there on the street, with the Jeep ticking and the sun exiting the sky politely. She held the photos against the wheel and felt something slot into place that had nothing to do with metal. She texted Lara, found the "keep going" and a picture and a line. "Don't yell at me for driving and texting, I'm pulled over." Lara replied with a picture of her mother's kitchen and the ring on the table and 2 cups of tea that were about to be drunk. The caption, "We're listening." That night, Alara fell asleep to rain on the window and woke to a quiet that was not absence, but accompaniment. She reached for her list pad and wrote in pencil, "Grease clutch linkage. Check timing. Replace canvas. Buy donor fender. Keep going." She circled the last one. The pencil left a soft gray halo where her hand pressed too hard. Weeks turned, and the Jeep made a different kind of map. Coffee shop, parts store, river, garage, diner, Lara's office, Micah's house with the garage door that now rolled like thunder and promise. The town learned the sound of its engine, and the way the wind off its windshield made you forget the thing you had been carrying that you could put down for a block or two. One evening in September, when the heat had decided to be kind, Elara drove to the fairgrounds where it had all begun. The auction building slept. A kid on a skateboard glided in slow figure eights. The chain-link fence still offered diamonds big enough to hook your fingers into. She parked where she had first heard the engine consider waking up. "Thank you," she said to the air that still retained the dust of that day, "for letting me hear you." The wind came over the roof and under the windshield and through her hair and did not say you're welcome and did not say anything else and said everything. Elara turned the key, the engine caught, and she steered them into twilight. Somewhere ahead, a bridge chose to be crossed. Somewhere behind, a letter kept its promise after the man could not. Somewhere in the middle, a woman with grease on her cheek and a list in her pocket, and a Jeep that liked her, was exactly where she was supposed to be.